The bar smelled like spilled beer and fried onions, neon lights humming and painting everyone's faces in sickly blues and pinks. Laughter bubbled at the far end where a pool table sat under a cracked mirror. A jukebox warbled a slow blues tune that snagged at the edges of the night. Two men sat at the counter, perfectly still among the small chaos, a matching rhythm in the way their shoulders relaxed and the way they folded their hands atop the counter. They were identical in the way only twins can be. Same jawline, same quiet line where the hair met the ear, same slow blink. People at the bar had seen men who looked like them their whole lives, and yet knew somehow these two were not like anyone they'd seen before. "ID?" the officer asked, abrupt and loud, as if he could cut through the music. "Just having a drink," one said. His voice was even and low, practiced at making things seem ordinary. "Step outside," the officer barked. Hands hit the counter in reflex. The bartender flinched. A cluster of patrons went quiet. There was a quick exchange of glances. Someone whispered something about trouble, and the jukebox went soft. The officers came with their hands hovering near belts, shoes scraping at the floor in a rhythm of authority. There were 3 of them, 2 patrol uniforms and a sergeant who kept his tone clipped but watchful. They moved in like they were expecting a fight already, as if the bar's dim light had told them everything they needed to know. "We don't want any trouble," the younger twin said. "We'll step outside." "Not tonight," the sergeant said. He put himself between the twins and the door, eyes darting like a practiced sentinel. "We got reports of disturbances. You two fit the description." "What's the disturbance?" the other twin asked, and when he spoke something inside the bar exhaled. The men had that kind of voice, calm, layered, like a safe dock in a storm. People leaned forward, craving the rest of the story. A caller's voice trembled through the sergeant's radio. The officer's face tightened. They said 2 black males, same clothes, near the back. Suspected of stealing a purse earlier. The bartender muttered, "That can't be them." "ID, please," the younger officer insisted. The twins complied. One flicked his wrist and produced his wallet as if performing a small, familiar ritual. His driver's license shone under the neon. He handed it across with deliberate ease, features relaxed. There it was, name, date of birth, profession, captain. The title sat like a badge of calm on the upper half of the license. The anchor pin on his collar reflected again in the officer's eyes. The other twin handed his license, and the sergeant's eyebrows rose. Commander. Not a title tossed around lightly. Not a rank that belonged in casual company. The officer squinted, confused, reading again. A shrug passed like a shadow. It was a shadow of surprise. "You two in the military?" the sergeant asked, softer now, as if the letters on paper could shift the mood like a temperature change. "Yes," the twin with tattoos answered. "Commander SEALs. Retiring soon." A murmur spread through the bar like a breeze. Conversations returned, quieter this time, questions threading through the cigarettes and the clanking glasses. The officer's shoulders dropped fractionally. The patrolman's voice lost the edge it had carried when it first cut into the song. "We still need to check the story," the younger officer said, folding the IDs. There was a lot he didn't know how to say. He had been trained to respond to descriptions. In his head, the description had been narrow and easy. In his hands were 2 men who had earned their titles through years of service, through nights the kind of people who'd been told to obey without question might never understand. "Walk with us," the sergeant said. "Just to the squad car." They moved outside into the humid night. Heat swam off the pavement and neon signs buzzed with electric insistence. A patrol car idled under an amber streetlight, the reflection of the bar's neon painting its hood in sloppy color. Cameras blinked on dashboard mounts. The radio murmured. "Can I see your hands?" the younger officer asked, almost politely, as if he had read the room and decided to try a different script. They put their hands where they could see them. Little movements like that, simple, human, calmed the night. For a moment, the world narrowed to 3 men under a street lamp and a radio that couldn't make up its mind between static and a voice. The sergeant radioed dispatch to confirm the description. "Suspect description matches. Over." Static. Then a voice. The officer explained the situation, reading numbers, colors, the kind of mundane identifiers that keep things organized in the face of chaos. The voice on the other end read back something that didn't quite line up with what the sergeant saw with his own eyes. "Tell them to hold," the sergeant said into his radio. "Hold. Wait on any action." "Why?" the younger officer snapped. "They match the description. They also match the description of 2 veterans who are known in this area," the sergeant said. He hesitated. There was recognition in his tone now, a careful, cautious memory. "They helped out last month at the shelter. They helped load up a van after the flooding." There was a beat where authority tangled with memory. The twins stood in the hush of the street lamp's halo, palms open to the sky, breathing like the rest of us do when something is almost broken and someone decides to fix it with breath. "I didn't want this," one of the twins said quietly. "We come to unwind. We come home for a few hours and there's someone ready to throw us out." "You're not under arrest," the sergeant said, although his radio still ticked with the echo of procedure. "But we're gonna file a report. Fill out a statement. Make it simple. Please," the twin with the anchor pin said. "We'd rather just go home." "Name, rank, unit," the younger officer said, playing his script. The words rolled off his tongue like a hymn. If this were a different night, if fear wasn't packing the corners of everyone's eyes, this would be a rote formality. The tattooed twin smiled a small, well-practiced smile. "We already told you who we are." There was history in that line. Years of answering for one another, a mutual shield that stretched back to childhood. People in the bar watched through the windows, helmets of glass framing them in their curiosity and in their silent prayers. The sergeant sighed. He had been on nights that started with assumptions and ended in regret. "Look," he said more plainly, "if you want to press charges over the harassment, we can take your statement." He looked away for a fraction of a second, the weight of something unspoken settling like dust. "But it might be easier to sort it without the paperwork." "Sort it how?" the younger officer asked. "Talk to the owner," the sergeant said. "Tell him to keep a lid on things." "That's not good enough," the tattooed twin said, his voice hardening for a second, a flash of anger sharp as a blade. "People think they can point and assume. People think we are what they fear." The sergeant's eyes were almost soft now. "You don't have to explain that to me." The twins looked at each other for a long second, a private conversation in the fall of their eyelids. The anchor pin glittered with the flicker from the bar. For a moment, what had been about accusation became about memory. Both men had spent years commanding in different theaters, giving orders behind maps and in cramped rooms where decisions lasted lifetimes. They knew the value of voice, of staying measured when everything else wanted to run roughshod. "Thank you," the anchor pin twin said. "We're tired tonight. We'll go home." The younger officer's jaw unclenched. He stepped back. The sergeant reached for his radio again, closing the loop for the night. Inside, the bartender lit a cigarette, a small puff of smoke curling up as if in relief. A man at the pool table chalked his cue and laughed too loud to be able to hear himself think. The jukebox reclaimed the tune. The twins walked out of the glow, shoulders brushing, like two halves of a page being closed. They didn't forget the sting. Nobody forgets the hot slide of suspicion in their hands, the way it feels to be sized by a description. But as they walked to their car down the block, something else threaded through the night, a tight strand of memory and purpose. "So, after this," the tattooed twin said, "you still thinking about that charity boxing match?" "Yeah," the anchor-pin twin answered. "But maybe we'll do something else first." "Like what?" "Like organizing a community meet and greet," he said. "Bring the kids. Bring the officers. Teach them about the sea. Teach them what it means to serve." The tattooed twin laughed, a short sound that was mostly warmth. "Teach them how to swim. Teach them how to trust," he said. They pulled out of the dark, and the engine hummed a comfortable note. The city spread around them in orange and steel, sirens far off like ghosts. The night had a way of making small shrugs feel enormous. They drove through neighborhoods they had known all their lives, past corner stores with tired awnings and alleyways that had seen better summers. People waved. Kids ran after dogs. Life continued its stubborn insistence. Days later, a flyer appeared in the community center. Free boating lessons and a meet and greet with local veterans. At the bottom, almost an afterthought, two names were printed, names that would have seemed impossible to pair in even the most imaginative headline: Captain and Commander Seals. The officers who had come to the bar came too. Not in uniform, not because the law demanded it, but because the law had a heart now. They stood at the edge of the dock, hands tucked into pockets, and listened as the twins talked about tides and discipline and the small, stubborn coroutines that made men into neighbors. A kid asked a question about fear. The tattooed twin answered honestly, about training, about trust, about the way fear became useful when you learned to name it. A police officer asked about what made someone a protector, and the anchor-pin twin told him the same thing he told the kids. The sea makes you humble. It shows you how small you are and how careful you must be with those under your watch. There were no grand apologies shouted across a microphone. The mending came in quieter forms: handshakes, cups of coffee, invitations to dinner, offers to help repaint a playground. It wasn't a tidy fix. Racism and suspicion didn't vanish into thin air because a flyer went up. But there was movement. That is often the first honest thing. At the end of the day, the twins sat on a bench by the water, the city a silhouette against an oil-slick sky. They looked at each other with the soft amusement of people who had weathered storms together and understood the small decisions that make a life bearable. "You thinking about staying here?" the tattooed twin asked. "For now," the other replied. "There's work to be done." They were quiet for a while, listening to the waves slap the shore like quiet applause. Somewhere, someone struck a match, and the night began to fold in on itself like a map once read. "You ever think we'd be stopped in a bar for something like that?" the anchor-pin twin asked finally. "Sometimes I do," said the commander. "More often I think about the work. It never ends. And that's okay," the captain said, "because we know how to come back. We know how to teach, and to change small things so they add up." They left the bench and walked down a pier that smelled of diesel and old rope. It seemed fitting. The harbor had always been where they could see both home and the horizon, where anchors could be weighed and purpose recharted. They promised to return, quietly determined to keep going on.